Alright, so today I want to show you how to identify genes in a white ball python. I actually had a comment under one of my videos and someone said, hey, can you do a video on how to identify genes and combinations? And let me tell you, that is one of the hardest parts of ball pythons. I even struggle with trying to figure out what genes are in a snake. If you actually hand me your snake, sometimes I can pick out one or two genes, and a lot of times there's some genes that are kind of hidden in there that are really difficult to pick out. And especially with the white snakes, if you make a white ball python, a lot of times the white snake will completely mask all the other genes underneath the white ball python. But in a lot of cases you can actually pick out a few genes and you can figure out which genes actually made your white ball python. So today I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you how to figure out which genes are in your white ball python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on Morphmarket.com and I want to start with this snake right here. This is an all-white ball python. Pretty amazing. This is pretty much everybody's favorite ball python. I've actually been to quite a few reptile shows selling hatchlings, and I'll have a whole 8-foot table with like 60 ball python hatchlings, and it seems like most of the people come up to the table and they're like, hey, can we hold the white snake? It seems like it really sticks out from all the other snakes on my table. As a matter of fact, most people, they don't want to buy the white snake. They just want to hold it and take pictures because it's really awesome. And say for example, if you actually went to a reptile show and you bought a pet snake that was an all-white snake, and maybe you've had it for a few years, and then pretty soon you're scratching your head thinking, I wonder what the genes are in this white snake. I actually pulled up a spreadsheet over here, all the different possibilities on how you can make a white snake, and take a look at all these different combinations that make an all-white ball python. It's kind of crazy. As a matter of fact, I actually pulled this from another video. I had a video on 38 ways to make an all-white ball python. I actually went back to that video and I took this spreadsheet and I was going to do this kind of like the flip side of trying to figure out what your ball python is. You know, the first video was all the different ways you can make one. Now, if you actually have an all-white ball python, now we can try to figure out or narrow down this list as far as what you actually have. As a matter of fact, I actually added a few more on the end here. I had 38 there, and I started realizing I actually missed quite a few combinations. I'm sure I actually missed more. There's probably more than 45 combinations as far as making an all-white ball python. If you actually see something that I missed on this list, you can actually add it to the comment section below, and we'll just keep adding to the list of white ball pythons. It's pretty amazing. So if you actually take a look at this list and you want to narrow it down a bit, you can actually look a little bit closer at your ball python. So for example, if you actually take a real close look at this one, you can see that the eyes are blue on this all white ball python. So as far as the white snakes, I'd say most of the times you'll actually see either blue eyes, black eyes, or red eyes, depending on the genes in the mix. And if you actually see blue eyes in your ball python, that really narrows it down as far as what you could possibly have that's making that blue-eyed leucistic. So if you I actually pulled up another sheet over here, take a look at this. This is all the genes in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. So there's 10 genes that if you mix any 2 of these genes together in one snake, you'll make an all-white ball python with blue eyes. And I was actually looking at this kind of, hopefully I actually got all the genes over here. I think there's just 10 genes in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. I was just kind of rattling these off the top of my head, and then based on that other sheet, I think I got all the genes in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. And there are some exceptions as far as a certain combination of genes that don't make a white snake. I think there's like 4 or 5 exceptions. So for example, if you actually had a Mojave Mystic, that is not an all-white snake. That is a Mystic Potion. And the Mojave Phantom, those 2 genes together, that's actually the Purple Passion, which is not an all-white snake. You can also have the Super Mystic, which is not white, or the Super Phantom. But besides those, I guess that's 4 exceptions out of all these combinations. Just for example, you could have like a Super Bamboo with 2 copies of the Bamboo, which would be an all-white snake, or you could have a Bamboo Lesser, Bamboo Mojave, Bamboo Mystic, Bamboo Phantom. All those would be completely white snakes. So you kind of narrow it down a little bit as far as the combinations in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. It kind of narrows it down as far as all the other white snakes. That probably cuts the list in half. There's still quite a few combinations. So for example, here's another trick that you can use to narrow it down even further. So take a look at this snake. This is another blue-eyed leucistic, an all-white snake with blue eyes. And if you actually have an all-white snake with blue eyes and then you have this gray head on the snake, there's pretty much only one blue-eyed leucistic that I know of that has a gray head. That is the Super Mojave. So if you have an all-white snake with blue eyes and a gray head, I can almost guarantee you have a Super Mojave with 2 copies of the Mojave gene. And kind of the interesting thing about this, so for example, this is actually listed as a Super Mojave, possible Enchi, possible yellow belly. So a lot of times you can have, you know, some people will say this is a Super Mojave and then they'll just say plus all the other genes that are possible in the pairing that came from either one of the parents. And a lot of times you really can't tell the other genes in the blue-eyed leucistic until you actually take that snake and you breed it to something else and look at the hatchlings as far as isolating some of those genes. So a lot of times you can actually tell which 2 genes or 2 or more genes came together to make the all-white snake. So here's another one. This is an all-white snake with blue eyes. Here's another indicator that might give it away in some cases, and that is the larger than normal eye size, the really big eyes. And sometimes the blue-eyed leucistics can be pretty variable. I've actually seen bigger eyes or smaller eyes, just kind of random through the blue-eyed leucistic complex. But one of the combinations that pretty much a lot of the times, not 100%, but I'd say it kind of leans more towards the bug eyes as far as the combination, and that is the super lesser with 2 copies of the lesser. So if you have an all-white snake with blue eyes that are really big, kind of like the bug eyes, you know, I'd say there's a good possibility you actually have 2 copies of the lesser gene. So here's another all-white snake with black eyes, and sometimes an all-white snake with black eyes can be a little bit tricky. In a lot of cases you'll actually have the super fire with 2 copies of the fire gene. One of the ways you can actually figure out if it's a super fire, sometimes you can actually see a little bit of yellow right down the back of the snake in little spots. So sometimes the blue-eyed leucistics in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, a lot of times they'll actually have a little faint yellow line right down the top, but this is actually in the black-eyed leucistic complex, completely different than the blue-eyed leucistic complex. And the super fires, usually if they have any yellow on the back, usually it's in little spots. And the other one that's really close to the super fire is the super sulfur. Take a look at this one. This is what a super sulfur looks like. And a lot of people think that the sulfur is just another line of the fire. Pretty much acts the same way in combinations, but a lot of times you can actually tell the difference between the two because the super sulfur a lot of times has really defined and sometimes really bright, like orange patches all down the top of the snake. So a lot of times I've actually seen the super fires have the same kind of a pattern with the yellow or kind of an orangish yellow up on top of the snake, except if you actually go back to the super fire, in this case it's like completely wiped out. I'd say you probably have a hard time actually figuring out this is a super fire, but if you actually had the same snake and you had really faint yellow patches like these little patches over here on the super sulfur, it's probably a super fire. So here's another one that's a little bit complicated, and that is an all-white snake with black eyes. That is actually a pied or a pied combination. And typically you can definitely tell the difference between like the pieds and the blue-eyed leucistic complexes, because a lot of times a lot of the other white snakes will actually have some color on the snake, where the pied will completely eliminate all the color on the back of the snake. There's nothing that can really break through the pied. So if you actually have a little bit of yellow coming through, you probably don't have a pied. And in some cases there's quite a few different ways to make an all-white snake with the black eyes that's a pied. This one happens to be a panda pied, which is a super black pastel with the pied. In most cases you'll actually know that you have a white panda pied because it's really super expensive. It's like, as a matter of fact, this one was like, this one sold for $4,000. More than likely you're not going to pick up a pet snake that is a panda pied, you know, at any reptile show, which is kind of crazy. So here's another one that can kind of trick you. This is an all-white snake with blue eyes, but it has really small eyes. And if you actually look really close at the color and the pattern on the snake, it is completely wiped out with no other color coming through. It's a really super stark white, which is, a lot of times you can actually look really close at the color of the snake and you can definitely tell if it's a pied or not. And this one's actually a pied. And the only one that I really know of that's an all-white snake that's really stark stark white with the micro eyes, especially with the blue micro eyes, and that is the lesser pied combination. So it's the combination of the lesser and the pied, and for some reason when lesser is mixed in with pied, you get an all white snake, and it really reduces the eyes, and in a lot of cases it actually has really bright blue eyes. And it's kind of interesting. You're almost tempted to think that this is a blue-eyed leucistic, where it's actually not really a blue-eyed leucistic, and for some reason, you know, the lesser is in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, but usually you need two copies of, you know, two different genes in the blue-eyed leucistic to come together to form the blue eyes. And for some reason, when you actually form this, so that it actually gives you blue eyes. So if you actually see an all-white snake with small eyes that are blue, a lot of times I can almost guarantee that you have a lesser pied ball python. So here's another all-white snake, and that is what I call the dirty white snake. And a lot of times they're dirty to more or less degree. You can tell it's kind of been like rolling around in the dust or something like that. It kind of has the sheen on it. Sometimes these can be really bright white, but a lot of times they're kind of like almost like they have some dust on them or something. A lot of times you'll actually see this interesting pattern right on the head, and this is pretty much the only one that's kind of like this. That is the super yellow belly, otherwise known as the ivory. And the ivory is kind of interesting too, because it's a really dominant combination. Nothing can really break through the ivory except the leopard, which is pretty interesting. You actually mix leopard with an ivory, and you'll actually see some pattern and color coming through the ivory from the leopard. And a lot of times if you actually have other genes in with the leopard will not only come through the ivory, but it'll also bring out the other genes in the ivory, which is kind of an interesting effect. So here's another one which is kind of interesting, and that is an all-white snake with red eyes. And let me tell you, every time you see red eyes on a ball python, that usually means that you have an albino in the mix. So this is actually an albino, and if you look really close at the color and the kind of the background of the snake, sometimes you can actually pick out what else is in there. So from the red eyes, you know it's albino, and you can actually see, I don't know if you can actually see it on the camera, but you can actually see from where I'm looking, you can see a little bit of yellow just breaking through the side of the snake, like a little sheen of yellow coming through. And a lot of times if you have a white snake with the yellow coming through, I can almost guarantee that that is a blue-eyed leucistic complex. And it's a little bit harder on this one because it doesn't have the blue eyes, because the albino really trumps the blue eyes with the red eyes of the albino. So as a matter of fact, this one's actually a cherry bomb, which is the super Mojave albino. So if you actually looked at this snake, you could probably say, well, we know it has albino from the red eyes, and we know it has two genes from the blue-eyed leucistic complex, but you don't know for sure which genes are actually in there. It could be like a super Mojave, it could be like a Mojave lesser, or like a lesser bamboo or something like that. So there's a lot of different combinations, but at least you kind of narrowed it down to two genes in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. So here's the last one I want to show you, kind of show you the difference between a blue-eyed leucistic complex combination and a pied combination. So if you actually take a look at this one, look at how bright white this one is. So this is pretty much the same thing as the last one. It's an all-white snake with red eyes, but this one actually has pied in the mix instead of two genes from the blue-eyed leucistic complex. And you can definitely tell from the difference in how white this snake is. It's really super white, which is pretty amazing. If you actually see these in person, they're like almost glowing like a bright white, which is pretty amazing. So this one's actually an albino spider pied, which gets a little bit complicated because if you actually had the albino and the pied together, a lot of times you'll have splotches of the albino color coming down the snake. So in order to get a completely white snake, you need another gene in the mix to completely eliminate the pattern, and that is, in most cases, that is the spider. And some spiders you can actually see has quite a bit of pattern on the head, and once in a while with the spider you'll actually get an all-white snake with the combination of the spider and the pied together. So sometimes you can actually add other genes to the combination to really force all the white. As a matter of fact, you can actually add Russo, so you could probably do the same thing with an albino Russo pied. Russo will force a really high white pied, and sometimes you get a little bit of color here and there in the Russo, but a lot of times times you'll get a completely white snake with a combination like this, so it would actually be an all white snake with the red eyes. All right, so what is time for the question of the day? And Scott Owens asks, do you make more money off of your ball pythons or off of YouTube? And that is a very good question. So I actually quit my day job about 13 months ago and I decided to go full-time on YouTube and breeding ball pythons, which has been kind of a crazy ride. I actually have multiple sources of income, and right now my #1 source of income, believe it or not, is actually the ad revenue from YouTube. So every time you watch one of my videos and you see an ad, I get paid about 1/4 of 1 penny for every ad you see, which is not a whole lot. And let me tell you, you need a lot of views to do pretty well with the ad revenue. And I actually have about 1,000 videos over on YouTube, which really helps boost my ad revenue. And I think it's really, you can actually make the most amount of money at the end if you go after the ad revenue, but you need a whole bunch of videos to do it. So that's kind of my #1 goal of my YouTube channel. And as far as my #2 source of income, I'd say that's definitely my ball pythons. And when it comes to the ball pythons, it's really a seasonal thing. So when I'm selling hatchlings, it's usually over a period of about 2 to 3 months that I'm making a whole bunch of money, and then the rest of the year I'm pretty much putting all the money back into the ball pythons with the food and the bedding and everything like that. And I actually have some other minor sources of income. Probably my 3rd source of income would be super chat from my live streams. I've been actually doing pretty good with that this year. I also do Amazon Associates. So if you actually look in the description link under my videos, there's some Amazon links, and if you actually click on one of those and go over there and buy something, I make a small commission from Amazon. I also do merchandise, which is a really small amount. If you actually look underneath every video, I actually have a merch shelf. You can actually go over there and buy some masks. You can buy some t-shirts and phone cases, and I have a whole bunch of different merchandise over on Teespring. And pretty much the last source of income that I have is Patreon. I actually have some people supporting me every month on Patreon, which is pretty awesome. Let me tell you, I don't think I could actually make the transition from a day job over to full-time YouTube without that Patreon. It's been a lifesaver. And if you actually donate to Patreon, essentially what I do is I put your name at the end of every video. I actually have an end screen with all my Patreon supporters over there, which is pretty cool. And as a matter of fact, those are all my present and past Patreon supporters. So if you actually sign up for Patreon and give me like $1 a month for just a couple months and then you stop, your name will be over there for every single video, which is kind of cool. You get the credit for supporting me through Patreon. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.